I don't know if people accept how fundamental consumerism is to what's happening. Housing is a core issue. Young people, they're never going to own a house. They're just going to move around based on job or something. Community providing housing. Then you have a thing that the young people can participate in by learning skills that help the community. It's a location for the financial participation in community. You can make the houses, the people can buy it. The money contributes back to the community. And when communities don't have that, the result is everywhere. You can see it.
Welcome to BeHuman.Love. I'm Eddie Fasula. I have a special podcast with my mentor and friend of nearly 30 years from Minnesota, Steve Jensen. He's been an influence on me in the Indigenous ways of both his Nordic, Danish ancestry, perspectives from that lineage, as well as here in the United States, so-called Turtle Island, some call it. The Indigenous elders that have influenced him have passed on teachings through him to me, so that's been a big influence in my life as well. So we took the opportunity to have some conversations around being more connected with the land, with what humanity is here to do. What is it to be human? And being an architect and myself being an engineer, we went into topics around housing and how that connects with the community space. I hope you enjoy.
What matters to me is how can I be of service? What choices do I make? How do I honor the people that I love?
Coming to the point where those values are important, how do people get to that place from recognizing that they're in a consumer society to a point where they say, I want to be of service. I want to care for the land and care for the people, and that's what I'm here to do. How do you get to that place?
That's a good question. It might take a minute. It might take 50 years.
Yeah.
Right now I'm thinking about a problem is that people assume there's an answer, right? That there's like a formula.
Oh, yeah. Like a certain overarching best knowledge of how you should practice life, and then this unlocks all the things.
Yeah, and this guy has sort of integrated these various systems, and boom, here it is.
And people have been selling that since Bronze Age, where you
forever.
Well, I don't know about forever. I think that there became a class of people.
Okay, not forever. You're right. For a long time.
There became a need for the class of people like that would say, you feel disempowered and lost within this empire? You feel disconnected from your spirit, from your land and your people? Well, I got a system for you.
Oxygen, here it is.
It fits within the empire, otherwise it wouldn't be allowed to exist.
Well, human beings love that.
Yeah.
Maybe there's other pathways. Right now I'm very interested in so like what happens if you quit looking for the answer and you just are content with being in the mystery? And the thing that I've found very powerful is within ceremony. So like we have a longhouse. We sit by a fire, the smoke goes through the roof, and maybe somebody will bring a story and they'll tell a story. And then some other things show up. We'll stay there for 16 hours or 24 hours or however long till we're done. And within that, our important information shows up. And maybe it's not something that you can codify or write an essay about. It typically is a message about love, service, kindness, bravery, sacrifice. It seems like that's where information shows up for me.
So how do you get, you said we have a longhouse, how do you get people in this consumer society accustomed to showing up for that? How's it been working?
It's a hard sell. I mean, I went to a friend. We'd been involved in many ceremonies and other organizations. I think my idea was pretty naive because I thought you could if you just made a place like anarchy, and just made a place where people could show up, mystery would also be present. And I believe that that is possible. But this friend and I built a longhouse. So we built a physical place. And this gets into this thing where we've talked about, and also mysterious, the memory of place. What holds memory? So a place that holds memory. And to get the people to come there, it's secret. They're invited. And they can show up or not show up. And as much as possible, there's not hierarchy. You earn your position every day, all the time, every minute. You know, it's egalitarian that way. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, some people have more to say and less to say, and some people have different life experiences. And Martin Prechtel talked about this. You know, we're pretty interested in the little lords that show up fast. But in fact, there's some old ones that move really slowly, and you need to sit still because they're the ones you really want to hear from. And I think just the physical act of having a place at a fire. You know, this is a thing we know. There's been fire. People have been looking at fire for a long, long time. So this is a common thing. This is like knowing an old, old song. So you're in this place, you're looking at a fire, and you're telling a story. And there are some wonderful stories out there. Stories that speak to you, speak to one, speak to different people. There's some really interesting stuff can happen if you spend the time. Mm-hmm. And I guess when we were talking about earlier, so like, I think it's important to educate yourself, you know, to know about history. It's important to know songs. It's important to know stories. It's important to learn, you know, if you've been lucky, you've been able to watch somebody that did that. You know, if you were lucky, you could watch somebody that you knew this person, and you thought, I would like to do that thing that they're doing.
Yeah.
And so that's just all part of education, and that's a responsibility. And to always learn this sort of eloquence and generosity, and you know, maybe even a little grandiosity. You know, okay, it's kind of all together, but it's this dance. To just be part of this dance.
We were talking about how you create this community of people who get to have that experience, and how you support that container of that happening, and I think that's a really spectacular accomplishment. That is, you know, people want that at scale, right? And yet to like, it's not something you can create a formula for. And you mentioned like exposure to an elder who you see as an example, and then that's helpful to find your way into your own elderhood. Mm-hmm. if you're committed and fortunate enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's, you know, I described sort of the mechanics of what we did, and I think it's maybe good enough, you know. And I think there's other ways of doing it. One of the issues is that it seems like a certain amount of hierarchy is unavoidable. And that tends to give this message that I have something that you need, right? And at that point, it becomes frozen. I have this thing, you need it. So that's a sort of a tricky, that's a dilemma.
Is that the nature of hierarchy in the sense of elderhood, or is that a consumer mind relating to that? I think more it's if you don't have a traditional system of elders, you sort of have to create it from, you know, on the fly. Yeah.
You don't have this whole system that is,
yeah,
led up to an elder.
So that leaves you vulnerable to all kinds of noise about what hierarchy is,
Yeah.
what a teacher is.
Yeah, and then it's a whole other deal. Stephen Jensen talks about this orphan. You're an orphan. And I think that's really important to acknowledge that, to understand that that is the situation.
Yeah.
You're not coming out of this lineage. And that, an elder is not, it's not a matter of age. It's a position that's earned. It's a position that is strictly related to your utility, to the people around, the people in this little community that you've assembled at the moment. And then, what do you do about arrogance? What do you do about greed? What do you do about arrogant young people or arrogant old people? How do you participate with those guys also? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's really, really difficult, I think. Your ally is a fire and time. It's like, okay, this is going to be boring. And then it's like, well, okay, I'm busy. Maybe that's it. It's something like boring. Or it's like, if you do a ceremony and you dance for 4 or 5 hours, you're different. When you go home, you're different. It's like you make a gift that hurts a little bit. You're different, right? There are these things that you can do. And it's not just to do them to be different, but it's like, maybe this is a way of being in the world. Maybe this way of being in the world is where I just sit in one place. Look at, people talk about being in nature. Absolutely, be in nature.
So you've had a long relationship with Indigenous people here in Turtle Island in your life.
Yeah.
And Martine Prechtel's teachings and guidance, which led you to Denmark,
yeah,
to your ancestral roots, which a lot of people don't even have that much knowledge to know even the country where their ancestors came from.
Yeah, that's right.
The region.
Right.
You and I both have had that blessing of knowing where our ancestors come from. But for me, it came much later, and then I realized when I started to learn about them that they had been with me the whole time.
Right.
And that's the condition of all of us orphans. That
right.
we all have these pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, yeah. That's right.
So how do we?
And that's what I think is mystery.
Yeah.
Like this stuff, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I know that.
And you're talking about holding a space where people can have those kind of memories come through, and be supported in having those memories, allow the ancestors to speak through them, interact with the community at the moment.
That's really well put, Ed. Yeah, that's what it is. And, and so I answered about the technology of it, but what you said is what it is. I talked about the physical part of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to do that, to make that sacrifice and to make that effort, that's a big part. Mm-hmm. That's a big part of it. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's all you can do, is just make the space. Mm-hmm. This is interesting. Going back to we have this framework. And we have this framework of the way we see things. And I'm talking about modern American culture, let's say that. And we sort of deal in big ideas. We have this big idea and it allows all these other things to happen.
Universal truths.
Universal truth, big money. All we need to do is get together $1 billion and we can take care of all this stuff. Yeah. And we'll have flying cars and that'll be great. And this kind of technology I'm talking about is really slow. and where are we going to get the concrete? Et cetera, et cetera. It's all these little parts. And, pattern language people would tell, they will call those little patterns. And I think that that's maybe I think that's maybe more like the way it's been. I think back in the old days, that's the way it was. It was more just little patterns, and you were just part of this. You were just part of this tapestry of patterns.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have this inspiration that in this time where we have this abrupt changes happening planetarily.
It appears that it is, yeah.
When you talk about the slowness of it, there's something really immediate in this time. As I reflect on the slowness of my journey over the last 30 years, I think, wow, is there a better way? Is there a better way at this time? I've been preparing for this moment for 30 years. Plenty of people were not preparing for this at all.
Right.
So when you talk about holding the space, right, and then holding the space for the patterns to happen, different patterns to happen.
Participating with different patterns.
If we support people participating in different patterns in the way that we interact in community, I have this sense that there's a remembering that is possible on a community scale, where you have these slow patterns, and then there are these node points where you can launch to a whole another level of consciousness. And from that,
but it might be a whole slightly different level. It might be
it might be very incremental.
Yeah, maybe.
And some of the most like mundane incremental things I feel have like been coming last in my journey, where I'm like, oh, pray every day at the altar. Like, okay, I get that now.
Yeah, right.
Which it seemed like an abstract thing. And then it's like, sort of like, I'm doing all these other things. Why don't I just actually do that?
Yeah, why don't I do that? Yeah.
And so I think that there's a potential then when you open up to that, then suddenly you find, I think it's the potential there is there for people to find like, wow, my ancestors have been reaching out all of this time.
Yeah.
And so it's an incremental thing on one level. On another level, a whole another realm of possibility happens with your relationship with everyday life and your community. And I'm thinking about this in the context of, you're an architect, I'm an engineer. That's how we first started this conversation. So there's this other aspect where we are trying to find, in a sense, we're sort of trying to find the formula. We're doing that, we're in that, the place of what we're saying. Don't try to find the formula.
We have that training.
You know, so it's like we're looking for a formula for a community. Like, how do you build your houses and how do you arrange the houses and the local economy in a way that's going to be a pattern that supports the mystery unfolding. And I think this is, both of us have been sort of, we've got the training and we've been saddled with this, like this question. And the more that we're in ceremony and we have epiphanies and we have authentic relationship with community and spirit, then we go into this other realm and it's like, oh man, like I got to figure out how to bring some of this into this.
Yeah, you're putting this in a really good way, Ed. That's really interesting the way you're talking about it. And it's sort of private stuff, I mean, it's sort of inside baseball, because you and I have, I mean, within our training, within just the relationship between you and me, incredible amounts of information and thought and practice, and pretty hard to reduce. But I was just reading, this is something that is cross-cultural, but this guy was talking about why it was important to wrestle. There was this Turkish guy, and he said, oh, well, the reason is, it's well done, it's beautiful, and gods love beauty. So like, that's why, to be in a community is beautiful, right? And it's this platform, for all the original teachings, these things that you want to do the things that you want to do that just slam into brick walls as you're going through the suburbs. There's just no place for it to go.
Sure. Yeah.
So out in your old country, where I live now still, out in the prairie of Minnesota, pretty conservative people. Well, they've been sending out these immigration secret police guys, these brown shirt ICE dudes. And friends in the city, they're marching and they have whistles and cell phone cameras, and they're having standoffs against these ICE agents and all that. Well, out in the country, once in a while you just see a pickup truck and a Suburban cruising down the road, and they're snapping people of color up. And there are a lot of them out there working in the farms and working in the big dairies and the food processing plants. Pretty vulnerable, And what's really been an inspiration to see these conservative people that are put in a position of deciding what is the difference between what is right and what is not right. And you assume that all these people are kind of like zombies and they're just going along with this pretty awful stuff that's going along. But there's been a lot of people that said, this just isn't right. I know these people. They deserve to have a happy life just like I do. And they are an important member of our community. They do all this stuff that needs to be done. And how can we protect them? Or how can we be helpful? And I was kind of surprised. I was really amazed. And this is all really sub rosa, This is under the table. It's very, people are really cautious. The chats are all done anonymously. The money that's gathered up is done anonymously, and so on. Mm-hmm. But I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud to see my friends and neighbors arrive in it involves a certain amount of courage.
And ethical wisdom, maturity on some level. You wouldn't think from watching the news is out there. Yeah, right. It's really going across the bias of what we hear. Mm-hmm. And these people are pretty comfortable being Christians and patriots and stuff like that. So they've had to do some thinking. They've had to really examine what's going on and where are they at in that relationship, which I think is really hard. Yeah. I mean, it's easy to change if you get forced into changing, right? You just go with it. I mean, it might be a little painful, but it'll happen. But maybe, if you're pretty comfortable, the change kind of looks like it's optional. And, like our mutual friend, Martin Prachtel says, yeah, well, okay, you don't have to do it, but your soul will rot. If you don't. You might not even notice it, but it'll happen. Yeah, so it's a really blessing. It's a blessing in a lot of ways that things are in the way that they are, that they're getting, the illusion is falling. And my dream is that there are places, as the illusion falls, that there are places for people to relate locally in community based on the original instructions. Yeah. And with all these blessings we have with the technologies and things that we've figured out, that we can put them to good use that supports the community rather than as like a byproduct of some people making a lot of money and starting wars and accumulating more power. I refer a lot to consumerism,
just because I think it's a kind of a primary driver of what we do, what we know, what we participate in. I can't think of the name of it now, but it's an old collective in Spain, in northern Spain, a type of co-op. And I think it's like, it actually occupies a major part of the Spanish economy. Really successful. And so we do have cooperatives. And I think perhaps cooperatives can continue to be more effective participant in the consumer society, because that fundamentally changes the relationship of people to stuff. We've talked about this. I don't know if people can really accept how powerful and how fundamental consumerism is to what's happening, what a big deal it is. And if you can change the nature of consumerism, then a bunch of other things are possible.
So housing is a core
Housing is
space.
a core issue. And housing in particular, because housing can actually be this receptacle of memory. We're in a situation right now where young people, they're never going to own a house, right? They're just going to move around based on job or something, relationships, something.
Affordable
housing. Yeah. I think that's really different than past times. Or at least, to have that receptacle of memory, that physical memory repository, I think is a really big deal. And so it's easy to see how that also interfaces with the economy of the community, right? If you can do that locally, I just jumped to that. The community providing housing, how does that work? Then you have a thing that the young people can participate in by learning skills that help the community. So it's a platform for that. The young people can help the community. It's a location for the financial participation in community. You can make the houses, the people can buy it. The money stays within the community, or the money contributes back to the community. So yeah, I think it's a big deal. And when communities don't have that, the result is everywhere. You can see it. I think you were mentioning that there's no correspondence between the shortage of housing and the price of rent.
Very weak.
Yeah, very weak.
Yep.
The value of housing, I think the value of real estate, period, but of housing in particular is, and I've thought this since the mid-'90s, I was in a real panic about it, highly overvalued. I think in Minneapolis City proper, the average house is $500,000. $500,000. Wow. I don't remember the situation, but you and I went on a tour of Uptown maybe 10 years ago. And we were just wandering around, and it was all this sea of kind of flashy apartments.
Yep.
Thousands of them. And then rocking bars down in the main level. And this housing that you look at it and it's this is the best it will ever look. In 10 years, this plastic is going to start falling apart. In 30 years, it'll be over. And so there's no equity. It's just a constant drain on the community, on the society.
On the environment.
Yeah, on the general community. Constant drain. And there's some real estate dudes that are making some money changing hands.
Sure, they can put new plastic on the building in 10 years and up the rent depending on...
Or they can sell it before the new plastic has to go on and then build another one.
Right.
And wherever the big money is. Right now, on the subject of consumerism, there's a lot of information about look at what's happening now and then don't do that. It's all sort of, it's kind of contraryism.
So what would be a positive vision for cooperative housing for a community that would be sustainable?
Well, there are a bunch of ways of discussing it, but how is this thing funded is a big question. How does a community fund something like that? And the typical answer had been that, you get some federal help or you get some kind of bond issue. So you get a bonding agent and then you pay them back over time. Another possibility, and these are the things about where is consumerism vulnerable? Vulnerable, that is, to positive change. Crowdfunding, for example. So you figure out what you need. You figure out what is a workable system, a physical, system, and what are the sort of what is the nature of the rules that you use? What is the nature of the principles? How does it work? And how does it participate with the environment is a major question. Can it in fact be helpful to the environment? This would be like watershed, things like that.
Regenerative agriculture, gardening.
Yes. Yeah. Planting trees.
Yeah, an eco plan for the whole community.
Yeah.
Where are the animal migration paths? What do the birds need at what time of the year?
Yeah.
Be coherent.
Yeah. So you can establish principles. And based on those principles, you can figure out technologies that are compatible with those principles. So then you try and fund out within the community. And you can also get help. There are people that want to help. There are people that they just want a way that they can be good.
And there's actually value in it as well. I mean, you
Absolutely,
ought to be able to make money actually providing good housing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so it isn't just, you can't rely on good guyism.
Yeah.
That's not how communities work.
So it's working
it's based on exchange.
It's working within the current economic system and consumerism mindset and making the shift in the way that we purchase instead of as an individual, but as a collective that's community based.
We need the collective for the production.
And the production side of it.
The production side of it.
So it's both the financial, the consumerism on a collectivism level, and then also absolutely the local economy of labor, training, keeping the money there. There's a lot of non-economic benefits to doing that.
Yeah, yeah. You could spend a lot of time filling in the blanks, but I think that's what the tune sounds like. You can bring in the orchestra, but that's what it sounds like. And that's just an example of how within this consumer society, which isn't going away quickly, within that you can do good things that have a profound impact. When you have a place that's sustainable, the people know each other. And I knew your dad. Oh, I even knew your grandfather, And why is it this way? You tell me, It's a whole different experience than moving around every 6 years.
Okay, so this is the prescription from Steve Jensen for the modern culture, sustainable community direction. And okay, I'm speaking tongue in cheek because you said this is the song. This is what it kind of sounds like. This is the vibration of it, right?
Yeah.
So without getting into specifics, let's talk about Native community. It's a really rare thing for an architect to have the kind of relationship, the understanding of Native culture here in the U.S. And I mean, you're informed with your own Native culture from Denmark, but having a lot of thought that in a lot of conversation we've had over the years, you really led me into it. My relationship started with being invited into Sweat Lodge and Pine River, Minnesota, and having a personal journey and then eventually learning about my own Mohawk ancestry and learning those stories. So I think another part of what I feel is the medicine of this conversation is having some recording of some of these conversations about how to come into some understanding about the similarities and differences between creating a sustainable community for a tribe as compared to us that are the orphans from the lost tribes. What are some of the things that we can learn from you about how we might approach that in a way that could be productive? Because what we see generally is there is no productive cooperation between Western architecture and engineering technology that's supportive for Native communities.
So, why be involved? This is sort of an economic principle, which is that capital wants to go where it's needed. Okay, so that's why.
That's how you make money.
That's how that works.
Capitalism works. Yeah.
That's how capitalism works. And I think that's how trade works.
That's how trade works, definitely.
You know?
I mean, capitalism, it's less purist when you talk about like the evolution of how trade has become capitalism, where you have the actual, the action of the people in authority and production, that their influence on the market. As compared to the market just existing, and the invisible hand brings things where they need to be because there's some profit in it.
So, why be involved with the Native people? They've been particularly, what do you want to call it? They've been particularly taken advantage of and really culturally rocked. So if you can make better housing, it can really have a profound impact. And that's my department. If I was a dentist, it would be a different thing. But it's, I don't need to figure out groovier houses for rich guys. I'm much more interested in, can I make a house that is really soulful and is this place where memory can be, where culture can be. And, you took me to that beautiful ceremony in Taos. And I was able to be in one of these little spaces, and it was like, this is really beautiful. And this is really different from the sort of typical housing you see at the res.
Can you explain what that ceremony was, or celebration?
Yes, it was a winter ceremony after New Year's. And it was a ceremony of gratitude. And it was... there were probably 30 clans, 25 clans, I don't know. And they each sent out a group of dancers. And each set of dancers would go to each clan house and sing. And there was gifting, and this went on till the middle of the night. So it was each clan sending dancers to each clan. And at the end, they stood each clan, the singers stood on a little bridge and sang a song to the whole community. So this is in the Taos Pueblo, and they still have many traditional rooms, traditional rooms in the house. And it would be a bench surrounding the space, a wooden ceiling with vega and then a little hearth, a little fireplace in the corner. And anyway, it was a really beautiful ceremony. I was totally rocked by that. I was really, and at the end, the dancers are exhausted, and they have this pile of booty from all the other clans. And it wasn't strictly clans. It was family houses and there were different sponsors of dancers. But then the old people told the young people, why do we do this? And it was profound, and it was really beautiful. So when I see that, I sat in council with other people, Native people. When I see that, I want to do everything I can to participate with that. And is there a way I can be helpful, So I want to do that. I think everything learns from everything, but there's things that are really visible working with the Native community, because they still have there's a little smell in the air of what used to be. It's more sort of obscured and, out in the suburbs. It's a little harder. It's really hard to see as you're cruising down the freeway to your job at the brokerage. It kind of was a little bit hard to see. So I think, just in terms of formula, like what does that look like? Like I said, like we talked about with the Longhouse, what does that look like? Well, I think maybe maybe you can make a little traditional space, and that's where the people kind of live. And then attached to that in a simple way, in a kind of elegant way, but in a substantial way, these other more modern things that you want. So it's not really like you're trying to build a old-timey thing. It's like, can you make this thing that becomes a generous, soulful repository of memory? What does that look like? Is that possible? I believe it's possible. And I think that every time you do that, the community benefits. You do it with your own home, the children benefit. The man and the woman, the man and the man, the woman and the woman, all the people that are in that house, they benefit. It's a powerful thing. The architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, said he didn't want to have basements because it teaches people to be disreputable. So this is only to say, can you build a house that teaches people, that encourages people to be kind and generous and at peace?
That would be a typical Pueblo house, right?
Yeah,
so,
I think so.
So a matter of working within that tradition in a way that's supportive of that. And centralizes that, and then the modern things that everybody needs to function in this society can be added on.
That's exactly, well put, Ed. In a nutshell, that's that. And, back to the word we used way back, a container. Like you're making a good enough container for that to happen. And if you don't have that good enough container, it's a mess. It's a mess.
And me, I'm always racing ahead steps down the line. Like, so let's say we achieve that. Let's say we get into a world where Native communities are supported that way. We have sustainable communities in our suburbs now. That's happening. Suddenly there becomes this, now that we have memory vessels in our Western world, in our communities are starting to organize in a sane way, there's potential for collaboration.
Yeah. As you were speaking, I was thinking about, like, if you're in this peaceful place, you're letting that just wash over yourself, right? Mm-hmm. It's this place you can just enjoy. Mm-hmm. If you're not, if you're renting some place in Uptown, right, you're thinking about, maybe I should have a bigger TV. That would be cool.
Maybe before I pray, I should run down and get a latte downstairs.
Right.
And as long as I'm down there, I need some new sunglasses.
Yeah, exactly.
Before you know it,
right,
day's over.
The day's over. Tomorrow. The day's over, and you've loaded up your credit card, so you got to work a little overtime.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's really insatiable.
Yeah.
And that's right. But by contrast, it's like, I love those tomatoes I had. My neighbor gave me some tomatoes, and I really want to pay him back. And he said, well, look, let's do this. Why don't you help me till my garden this spring, and I'll help you set up a garden. We'll get some tomatoes growing, and maybe you can also grow some carrots, and mm-hmm. Suddenly that's a possibility. That's pretty fun. And we'll get some beer. Yeah. I'll pick up some beer, and it looks like it's going to be a nice day on Saturday, and
or country wine.
Yeah.
Make our own country wine from
exactly.
apples that rotted last year.
I've been making whiskey.
Not that either of us are big drinkers. But
no, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to drink a little cider, I think.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to do that. So I talked to a friend about this a long time, and he's super smart about it. He's a venture capitalist, really smart about it. And I had this idea that there was a way of actually accept the fact that we're a consumer society, but that it could change. I mean, there was like no rules that said it couldn't be good. It couldn't do good things.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, that's right. It doesn't it's just that it works out that way, but there's no bias that it has to be this sort of destructive thing. There's not a benefit to that.
Right. It's just a matter of making money, whatever is the maximized profit. That happens to be very destructive.
And the one real issue is the way we've sort of encouraged the centralization of the capital.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why people say, well, what else are we going to do? I mean, we got to go to these guys, these institutional bankers. And it's like, well, no, you don't. Now there's crowdfunding, depending on what you're trying to make. Right. The other thing, and I got friends that just tell me to shut up as soon as I bring this up, but I was trying to think about, like, I remember way back before there were smartphones, right? And before there were smartphones, we went about our lives. Now, everybody's got them. They're ubiquitous, right? And I would say, like, for me, they're, maybe kind of ethically neutral. But I was thinking, well, is there another product that would be, like, net positive? I mean, if you can make a product that people would adopt that was net positive, it would be a big deal. And one thing I thought about was, if you lived in a city, electric bicycles. I mean, if you weren't fighting with cars and stuff, if it was just bicycles, you'd have something. And suddenly you'd have this political upswell to make it easier and safer to use bicycles and disincentivize cars. It would disincentivize urban sprawl, suburban sprawl, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it could have a major impact. And the people who would vote for it might not be Republicans that vote for the bike lanes. So I guess you don't get elected because we like bike lanes. But that kind of an idea. The other thing with bicycles, you don't need to be General Motors. You can crowdfund, right? I mean, you could have a little business and you make 50 bikes in a year, and you can support your family with that. That's pretty good, And then along these bike paths, there's little pubs and coffee shops and a bike repair shop and a little bookstore. And then there's a little salon that people hang out at. All these businesses. So it becomes a sort of community based on a product. So it's possible, I can imagine some profound consumer impact. Mm-hmm. So I was keen on this electric bike idea, and I thought, well, I should, I don't have an electric bike. And I saw a crowdfunding offering. It was a Danish bike company. I was over in Denmark, and I said, okay, I'm in. I think they were trying to raise $50,000 as a startup to make these electric bikes. So they entered into it. Well, they raised $16 million crowdfunding, which wasn't what they were trying to do. So then they had to figure out how to have a bike factory. And how did that work? And it was a struggle. I mean, they weren't set up. That was not what they wanted to do, and they weren't set up to do it. And they figured it out, and it was hard. And they're still around. They're still in business. But I guess the amazing thing was just how hungry people were for that possibility.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, wow.
In a little country like Denmark, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a country of 4.5 million people.
And they raised millions of dollars.
16 million. Well, they set it up as an international deal.
So you could get these bikes anywhere in the world.
It was sent to me in America, yeah.
Okay.
When I eventually got it, I mean, they had this idea that they'd just get a bunch of frames somewhere and kind of put it together, and then they found out, no, they had to really get involved, and they needed a lot of, like, this kind of gear and this kind of motor.
Right. So they had to make all those relationships with vendors and all that stuff.
Yeah, and that happens in Taiwan, and that is a particular industry, and those guys it's not that easy to just start building bikes, but they did it, and I think they've had a lot of fun with it.
All right, cool. So we've got a few concepts that could be brought into crowdfunding.
Yeah.
And we've got your backup as far as if we need an architect who can help us make things happen and design things.
And you as an engineer?
Yeah, sure.
I think especially for architects, especially for engineers, it's like Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah.
You really are looking for these possibilities to be helpful. I mean, mostly you studied these things to be helpful.
Yeah, and then you find yourself in a very destructive industry.
Yeah, right. You're just not always able to fulfill your obligation.
Yeah.
And so to keep that in sight and to keep on working on it, I mean, you and I have been doing this for, I don't know, Ed, a long time, 25 years. I've been playing with the technology.
Yeah, and I work as a R&D director for a sustainable housing effort and
soil regeneration.
Soil regeneration, solar thermal panels.
Yeah.
Winona LaDuke now owns that technology, and Eighth Fire Solar folks, if you're looking for a solar panel, they manufacture them.
Solar thermal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Air panels.
I'm into that.
Yeah. And so there's things that we've done along the way, although the scale of what's needed is really big.
Well, something I want to say about that is that, so when I say we've been doing it for a long time, that's what doing it looks like.
Yeah. Long time?
No, long time.
Frustration?
And long time. Well, what do you mean? It's like you were making screws. And you said, that's right. I was making screws that went into this thing.
Yeah.
And you couldn't do it without this screw.
Yeah.
People think that it just it's not like Venus, just sprigging out of the foam. These things happen incrementally, and,
Yeah.
and that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
Like.
Not super sexy, but.
Well, I mean, it's
if
sort
you do
of
it
like.
in community, it can be
Yeah,
sexy,
well, it's
it can
like
be fun. And,
I've always been really, and I don't know if this reflects on how I'm not very clever or what, but like, I really want to know how this technology works. I mean, I want to actually feel it.
Yeah.
And without doing that, it's just sort of some guy's opinion.
Yeah. What's it like on site when you got your tool belt on and the weather's coming in and the reality of life?
Like I was putting up some roof panels, and they get pretty heavy, even though it's the
foam insulated panels.
Yeah, 16-foot span, and whatever's required, R40 roof or something like that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we were using what was it? It was an old forklift. Yeah, I mean, an old piece of equipment with these extended forks and chains, Mm-hmm. And there's trees. It's hard to maneuver. I mean, this thing was not articulated at all. You go up and down and like that, and that was it. And, it's like, you can do it, but if you had something with just one more elbow, it'd be easy. One more piece of articulation. Or it's like the thing you're working on now. Yeah, you could do it with a crane, but if you could do it like this, that would be cool.
The heavy transport stuff.
Yeah. But I mean, just as an example, like the proper, what are you doing? Like if you're doing it right, it's easy. Or you can optimize that.
I mean, you can design your tools and your equipment and your process and your training and everything to match the technology you're choosing, and then there's the whole question, I think, as far as decentralized manufacturing and sourcing and all of that can be really optimized, modern time maker spaces and sharing blueprints, electronic CAD files and things that can be community-based knowledge, federated intellectual property methods shared and selected from a global toolbox of what's appropriate locally. I mean, the technology and communication we have is incredible. I mean, what you can build. Unfortunately, a lot of the skills are going away. But an old guy that would putter around his machine shop in his garage now with the technologies we have, a guy from 40 years ago, the kind of old guys I learned blacksmithing from and things. Like now with the technologies we have, the things that you can do is amazing.
I think another important part of, I don't know, what do we call it? Community housing development, or I don't know what to call it, is its scalability. Like, how far do you need to get into manufacturing? And, can you do it? Are you set up to recognize it? Are you set up to understand Now is the time we make this stuff. We need a bigger factory, or we need another factory, or, or like we're not going to need a factory, or however it is. What kind of technology, do we need to change our technology? If it's a community thing, you need this conversation available. What are we doing? Are we still doing what we planned? Do we need to change the plan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Or you end up right back where we started, which is, come on, boys, this is what we're doing right over here, right?
Yeah.
There's money to be made. Come on. So, I mean, it's a dance, huh?
Yeah,
but the more
sure.
you have people invested in, financially, but also in terms of like, I really think training is a big deal. This has been a real issue. It's a real issue in rural everywhere. I see it in rural Denmark. I see it in rural Minnesota. What will the young people do, And can they have a skill that they can earn money to take care of themselves and their families, So I think that's super important. I know some people that have had it started out as a conservation group, and they're just aces at writing policy. They've been very successful at writing policy and getting that into the legislature. They've been very successful getting funding. But the thing that's sort of lacking is, what is the impact on the community? I think what's going to be a major deal in northern places is, how do you keep your house warm? This heating.
For sure.
And there's some modern heat pump technology, the air source. And I mean, you can look this up on the web, how that works. But air source heat pumps. And the payback is pretty quick. They're super efficient. They're 5 times more efficient than just resistance electrical heat interface as air source, like a forced air furnace or radiator system or in-floor heat, which is something that I really think is a good way of doing it. And I said, you should really set up an academy where kids can learn how to put in heat pumps, or let's say young people, because in fact, it's probably not that difficult. It seems difficult because you go to the local plumber and he's never done it before. He doesn't know how to do it. But there's probably, there's a finite number of possibilities. Like there's maybe 5 situations. How does the power get in? How does the heat get into the house? How does the cooling work? And once you know how to do that, that's case B, C. That's a case D. Bring your tools, You set up this academy, you'd learn this way of doing it. You'd be big enough that you could actually be a dealer of the equipment, for the equipment. And you'd show up with your box van and you'd have your stuff in it and you'd do it. And it would be very economical. The mechanics would make good money and the people would get a good product. And that would be a way of having a profound impact with this conservation thing you're trying to do. And when you get done with that, you as a young person, you could go out and have your own business. You could go to this place where it's not happening and you'd have plenty of work, et cetera. So, I mean, I think that's another example of, basically using consumerism, technology consumerism, in a really positive way. See, most of this stuff cannot happen in your head or with your mouth. A lot of this stuff requires your hands. And I think that's something we've forgotten. Like you said, there used to be this old guy down the block, he could do all that stuff. And those guys aren't around anymore.
Yeah, but young people can learn.
But people can learn. That's right. It's sort of an elegant system because at some point, these old guys aren't telling you to do it this old way. And there's this new way that's actually better. So you learn that. You're not dragging this old guy around. There's some elegance to that.
Yeah, smart. Thanks, Steve, for being allowed to record some of our conversation. I mean, this isn't actually anything new for us, but it's an honor to have you here. And
Ed, thank you. I mean, I've spent many happy hours speaking with you. And, to me, it's such a blessing to hear what's going on in your head and how that modifies what's going on in my head. And these new things that come popping up. It's amazing. The mystery,
Yeah.
how these things arrive. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, man, it's an honor. Likewise. Love you, Steve.
Yeah, I love you, Ed. Thank you.